Hello everyone, it's Shannon for Waffle Flower Crafts. Today I'm going to combine Emboss Resist and Tombow Dual Brush Pens to make those two cards that you saw there. I'm going to start with the beautiful Pretty Foliage Stamp Set. I'll also be using this Little Mermaid stamp set, using some words from this set to make my sentiment. And then I'll complete my sentiment with this word die. It's called Magical Word Die. I'm going to start with the Pretty Foliage Stamp Set and an A2 panel. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and the panel is made from 110-pound white cardstock. I just pulled off the largest vine from that Pretty Foliage stamp set, and I'm going to mount it here on an acrylic block. I'm going to repeat stamp this till the whole background or the whole panel is covered with this vine. So I'm basically making a background. I'm going to ink it up in Versamark, but before I stamp it, I'll put down some anti-static powder because I will be embossing the stamped image, and I don't want that powder to stick anywhere besides where the image is. Inking it up in Versamark, and then I'm going to stamp it right here in the center. And then I'm going to pour on, now that I've stamped this, I'm going to pour on the white embossing powder. And I'm going to repeat this process till the whole entire panel is covered with that vine. I do flip it each time just to change up the direction of the leaves, but they're still always vertical. The stamping is always vertical. So now I'm going to heat set this. I'm using 110-pound white cardstock today. Even though I will eventually introduce some water into this project, I almost always use watercolor paper when I'm going to incorporate water, but this time I took a gamble and I tried some of this 110-pound cardstock, and I really liked the results I got. The surface is nice and smooth in comparison to watercolor paper, which has a bit more tooth to the paper. And I think because of the nice smooth surface, I got more play with my colors when they were activated by the ink, by the water. And I also didn't have a lot of warping, which I was really surprised. That's why I've never used I always use watercolor paper because I want to reduce the warping, but I didn't tape this down, and even still I didn't get a lot of warping, so I was really pleased with my results. You can try this with 80-pound cardstock. You might have some success, but it probably will have some more warping. I'm sure 65-pound will not. Well, you'll get probably too much warping, but if you don't have 110-pound cardstock, you can definitely use watercolor paper, and you'll still have really pretty results. So I've just finished stamping one half, so I'm now going to flip it over and complete the other half of my panel with this vine. So that's the last vine there that I'm heat setting, and now this panel is completely covered with the vine. So it's basically a background with that vine. Really, really pretty. I love the details in that vine stamp. Okay, so now I'm actually going to be working on my second panel because I'm making two cards today. So this is the second panel. I'm going to use my MISTI this time. I've got an A2 panel of 110-pound white cardstock in my MISTI. I just put down my acetate grid on top. I'm going to use that as a guide to help me position my stamps. I'm pulling off the sentiment from the Pretty Foliage Stamp Set. This says, "Hello, gorgeous." And then I'm going to pull off some stamps, some flowers and leaves from that set, and position them on the left side of my panel. I'm keeping it to the left because I'm basically doing pattern stamping. This is a Jennifer McGuire technique, one of my all-time most favorite techniques that I've learned from her. I am going to flip this once I've stamped this left half. I'm just going to flip, or I shouldn't say flip, I should say rotate my panel to stamp the right half. And you'll see me do this in the video. So I'm just picking up those stamps now that I've got them all positioned on the left side of my panel. Move that acetate out of the way. And again, I'm going to emboss this, so I'm going to put down some anti-static powder. And then I will ink up those stamps with the Versamark ink. And then I'm going, just like before, I'm going to emboss this with some white embossing powder. So just going to ink this up, fold it over, and stamp those images down. And once I heat set this, I can do the other half. So when I do the other half, like I said, I'm going to just rotate my paper around and And then the blank half will now be positioned where the stamps are, so I don't have to reposition the stamps on my MISTI, but I am going to pull off the sentiment because I've already stamped that, and I will reposition one flower, and I'll explain that better when we get to that point in the video. So I've just showed you I embossed the other half, so now I'm going to rotate my paper. See, so I'm showing you I'm rotating it. So now the blank half now is over there on the left side where all the stamps are. The right half now is that stamp side I've already have, but because I've rotated, I know it's hard to see in the video, the sentiment is now upside down. So what I'm doing now is pulling off that flower, and I'm going to flip it upside down as well, but when this is all finished and the sentiment is back right side up, the flowers on both sides of the sentiment, the right and left side, will be upright. That was the only stamp I felt like in my pattern stamping ensemble that I had to flip. All the other leaves and flowers are totally okay being upside. In fact, you can't really tell if they're upside down or right side up. It doesn't matter for those images. Just that one flower, I didn't want it to be upside down. So that's the only stamp that I did change besides removing the sentiment. And now I'm just inking it up again in Versamark ink. And then I will heat set this with some, pour on the white embossing powder and heat set that as well. And it's such a great quick way to get basically your whole panel stamped. I really love this pattern stamping, and I love the designs that it makes. I love the mirrored kind of image. I really like it. Okay, so that's all done. Now I'm ready to do the coloring part, the fun part. So I've got both my panels done here. They're all embossed with the white embossing powder, and the white embossing powder is going to be a resist to the ink that's in these Tombow Dual Brush Pens. I'm going to start with these three colors. It's 133, 158, and 346. That's going to be for the vine panel. And then I'm going to use three different colors. That is 993, 885, and 665 for the left panel, which is the one with the flowers, and it says Hello Gorgeous. So those are my colors, and now I'm going to start coloring. I'm starting with the vine, and I'm going to start with my lightest shade. You just want to start with your lightest shade. You can use whatever colors you'd like. Try to pick colors that do, when they mix together, they make pretty new colors instead of brown, muddy colors. So I kind of stuck with the green palettes because they'll just mix together nicely. But you do want to start with your lightest shade and work your way up to your darkest shade. That's just that way so you can reduce your contaminating of your markers or your pens. And you do not have to use Tombow Dual Brush markers for this. I really love their bright, vibrant colors though, so they're my preference. But any distress markers will work as well. Something that's water-based. And all I did there after I loosely colored it, you saw I just kind of did swatches of color. I just spritzed it a couple times with a fine mist of water and then moved it around a little bit, used a brush to kind of help move the ink. I'm going to do it again here on this panel. I used a brush to move the ink to the edges, and then I set it aside to dry. Really, really simple. So very loose coloring, not trying to color a flower a particular color, just being very loose and letting the colors kind of mix and play together on the surface. So I'm going to continue this. So you do want to cover most of the panel, pretty much get most of those white spots because the colors don't move that much, so you do need to get a lot of ink on there. Spritz it a couple times here. And the colors are starting to move, which is good. That's when I know to stop spritzing. And then I'm going to use my brush here to just kind of move that ink to the edges so there's no white spots. So the whole panel is completely colored. And you can even use your brush to mix colors a little bit if you just think it's too much yellow or whatever color in one spot. You can kind of mix it together a little bit more. And now I've let the panels dry. And they're all dry now. And you can see how beautiful and vibrant those colors are. I did get a tiny bit of warping. I'll fix that in a bit, but most of the warping can be fixed just by when you adhere it to your card base. So not really any warping that's a problem. What I'm doing right now is cleaning off the embossed areas with a very, very slightly damped towel. If you have too much water on your towel, you're going to actually pull up your ink. So be very, very careful of your water amount on your towel. I'm just kind of buffing those embossed areas to remove any of that ink that's on top of those, sitting on top of those embossed areas. So the embossed areas are nice and white and crisp. So now that I've got that all done, I'm going to take these two panels and set them underneath a weighted object. I'm using just the platform from my die cutting machine, just placing them underneath that and letting them sit with that weight on top of them, just to kind of take some of the little bit of warping away, and let that sit while I work on my sentiment. So I'm doing two different sentiments today. I'm going to use this, I'm using the Hello Gorgeous again that I stamped on the center of that second panel. I'm going to stamp it again on black cardstock just because I wanted the sentiment to stand out more. And then the second sentiment, I'm using the Little Mermaid stamp set, pulling off Have A and Day, and then I'll complete that sentiment with Magical using that magical word die. But first I've got to stamp these on a strip of black cardstock. Because I'm doing black cardstock for both of these, I'm going to stamp them and emboss them with white embossing powder. I'm just going to do it all in one go, and then I'll trim my strip down with my paper cutter and then do some final trimming with my scissors. So I'm just going to position my stamps here using the edge of the MISTI to kind of help keep everything straight. And then once I've got all my stamps positioned, I'm inking them up with the Versamark again. And then I'm going to white emboss them as well. So just stamping them, and then I'll white emboss them and heat set them. And I just found this was to be easier just to stamp all those sentiments at once and trim them down. That's just the reason why I'm doing it this way. Just one go. So I've trimmed them down with my paper cutter, and now I'm doing some final trimming with my scissors just to separate the words into two parts, two strips for each card. Okay, so now I'm going to show you, I've already die cut 4 of the magical word with the magical word die, and then I adhered them together. So I cut them out of black cardstock and I adhered them together, some liquid adhesive, one on top of the other. And now that I've got all my sentiment strips done and my panels have sat underneath that weighted platform for a little while and they're nice and flat, it's time to put it all together. So I'm going to use some Tombow Mono Multi-Liquid Adhesive. This is my new favorite way to adhere my panels onto my card bases. The liquid adhesive gives me a little bit of give, and it allows me to adjust the panel so it's perfectly centered every time. Unlike tape adhesive or tape runners, you sometimes have one go, and if you don't get it straight, it's kind of like it's just stuck there. So I'm preferring this method for sticking my panels on right now. So that, I'm just going to put the weight on top of it while that dries just for a second. It dries really quickly, so which is really nice. Just going to do the exact same thing to the second panel here. Just put some down on that adhesive and then adhere it down to a top folding A2 card base. So this is 11 by 4 1/4, scored at 5 1/2 and folded. And adhere that down. And then I'll place this one underneath the weighted platform while I adhere the sentiment onto my first panel. So just going to put that aside. So for this one, I'm going to use the Have a Magical Day. So I'm grabbing that dimensional word magical, because I stacked up all those 4 layers, so it's got some height to it. And then Have a Day. I'm going to position it here, and then I'm just going to use some liquid adhesive. This adhesive is in a fine nozzle bottle, which I purchased. It's one of my best purchases ever. It's very helpful to have that fine tip, and really great for when I adhere small things, especially like this word magical, which has got lots of fine little lines and areas. That fine tip nozzle allows you to get glue on those small parts. Okay, so I didn't bother keeping the eye dot for magical, so I'm using this Ranger enamel accents to just make a little dot over the eye to complete that word. I find this a lot easier than trying to save, or especially try to stack 4 little tiny dots on top of each other. It's kind of like impossible. I really like that Ranger enamels as a solution for your the dots for your eye or your exclamation point or whatever. Okay, so now I'm on to the second panel. This one's really easy. I'm going to go right over the stamp sentiment, and again, I'm doing this just because I liked the black and white. I thought that popped better and added some great bit of pop to the really bright background. I've taken the sentiments and I'm just putting a little bit of foam tape on the back, and I'm just going to adhere them right on top so they have a little bit of dimension because of the foam tape. And that is done. Really, really like the bright colors in this card. I love it. And the two together, the warm and the cool, just really pretty. So that's my cards. I hope you guys enjoyed them today. If you want any more product info, please visit waffleflower.com, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching today, guys. I hope you have a wonderful week.